Hi everybody and welcome to another Gaffer and Gear. In today's episode we're going to be having a look at this light. Now it's called, and I'm not making this up, the Kickasspanel Full Color by Lupo. Now I'm not reviewing small pocket lights anymore unless there is a point of difference between that light and other lights that are on the market. So what's the point of difference with this unit? Well, it's got a concentrated 40-degree beam, and as the name suggests, it has a kick-ass amount of firepower. Okay, so let's start off this review with a conversation about kick-ass. Is this light actually kick-ass, or is it just a name? All right, so I'm going to assume that the measurement for kick-ass is brightness. All right, so there's a couple of things we need to consider in here. So this is only 20 watt, okay, and it's a concentrated beam, 40 degrees. So if we're going to compare it to another light to see if this thing truly kicks ass, we need to compare it to something that's a similar wattage and a similar beam angle. Now, as it happens, I do happen to have a light, the Luxley Fiddle here, which is a similar beam angle. So I'll just show you that. Very similar beam angle and a very similar wattage. Now, the Luxley Fiddle comes in at 18.5 watt. This is 20 watts. There's only 1.5 watt in it, and both lights are direct. Okay, so that's a fair comparison, and both lights have a concentrated beam. Now, the Kickasspanel gets its beam by using reflectors. So each one of these circles is actually a reflector, and the LEDs are inside that reflector, and the reflector punches the light forwards. The Fiddle gets its concentrated beam by using lenses above every group of LED emitters. Okay, so two different ways of doing it. All right, so how do they go in comparison with each other in terms of brightness? Only 1.5 watt difference between the two. All right, so the Kickasspanel comes in at 5.4 times brighter than the Luxley. So I think in terms of its size and in terms of its brightness versus how much power draw it has, only 20 watt, I think it is fairly safe to say that this light is kick-ass. All right, now brightness isn't everything, so we'll cover other things in the video, but first off, let's start off with how much it costs and what you get for your money. So you're looking at around $300 US, which is a fair bit of money, but it is very solidly built. So it does look like it's plastic, but it's actually a technopolymer. I've got no idea what that is, but it sounds very impressive. I can say this though, it is fairly strong. I have dropped it and it does bounce pretty well. It'll take a MPF series battery. That will run the light at full power. You've got other power options as well. So you've got a DC plug here, which is 12 to 24 volts. So you could run it off a transformer. You can even run it off a V-mount battery, which is how I'm powering it. And it also has a USB-C power inlet here. Now the USB-C will run it at 50% brightness, but given how bright this thing is, 50% brightness running off a USB, it's still pretty powerful. Now on the side here, you've got threads, or screw threads. That's for mounting your diffuser, but if you're not going to use a diffuser, that thread is compatible with the thread that's on a spigot, so you can use that as another mounting point. Okay, you also get in the kit a diffuser, which is just a sheet of plastic. You get a ball mount, which also has a camera shoe and a thread at the bottom, so you can mount it to a light stand, and you get a USB-A to USB-C cable. All right, so let's get this on the stand and we'll chuck the diffuser on. Now I better mention before I forget that the unit is full RGB WW, but here's the one issue with it. The white emitters are spaced in a checkerboard formation. So without the diffusion, you can get multiple shadowing, particularly if the light is close to the subject. Now the diffuser doesn't give you a complete even milky white light surface, but it does blend everything together enough that you get rid of that multiple shadowing. Now I've taken some photos to show you the multiple shadowing, and that's with the light set up as it is here, with no diffuser at 5,600 degrees Kelvin. Now this is the shadowing with the light 1 meter away. This is with the light at a distance of 2 meters, and this is with the light at a distance of 3 meters. Now, in my experience with lights like this multiple shadowing isn't a problem if you're using it as a hair light or a backlight. or if you're using it to light a background, say to add a color. As long as you don't have anything in the foreground casting a shadow, it won't be an issue. All right, so let's go through the pros, and I think they're pretty obvious. It is very bright for its power consumption of just 20 watts, and it is a very small fixture. So if you're looking for something that's portable for an interview kit, something you can use as a backlight or a hair light, it's pretty hard to go past this. Now, the next pro with it is it is very lightweight. It comes in at just a little bit over 0.5 kilogram. So if you're looking for something as a run and gun light, something you can put on top of your camera to fill light in your presenter's face on a sunny day, this unit is also good for that. All right, so let's start going through the cons. And the first one for me is the user interface. Now, the user interface isn't a disaster, but it is also not intuitive to use. So if you were going to rent this, for example, I would say have a play with it for 20 minutes to figure out your way around the menu system before you go on set. All right, so I'm just going to show you what I mean by it's not intuitive. So let's say we want to change to a special effect. All right, so we have to press the OK button here to get into the menu. Now we're in the first level of the menu where we've got a choice of manual, device settings, device preset, and exit. Now, manual is actually where all your modes are. So I suspect the word manual is a bad English translation. Okay, so let's select manual. Now let's scroll through with our up and down buttons until we get to special effects. Then we select OK, and then we select cop car. Let's do cop car. Let's have a look at that. Now the special effects are not too bad. The only effect I don't really like is the fire effect. That looks a little bit too theatrical to me, but the rest of the effects are quite good. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Let's say we want to now go back to our CCT mode. All right, so in order to do that, we have to press the OK button. We have to select manual, which is where our modes are. And then we have to scroll down until we find our CCT and then select OK. So there's a lot of button pressing to get around the menu system. It really could do with a mode button that just scrolls from one mode to the next. Now the next possible negative for this light depends on where you live in the world. So if you live somewhere that's hot, that has a lot of days over 35 degrees Celsius, this is not a good light for you because it's only rated at a maximum ambient temperature of 35 degrees Celsius. Now that brings me to my next possible problem with this unit, and that is it is passively cooled, which is great, no fans, but there's no heat sinks inside here. It is relying on cold air going over the LEDs to cool down the LEDs. So if you have this sitting on a flat surface, for example, where it blocks the air vents, like say here, what will happen over a period of about an hour is you'll get a massive delta UV shift. So what that means is your green magenta will change in the light as the LEDs overheat. Now the next possible negative, particularly if you're running off MPF batteries, is there's no battery status indicator. So you've got nothing to tell you if your battery's going flat. Now I'm running this thing off a V-mount battery via a D-tap. So this is only 20 watts. By the time this battery goes flat, the shoot will be well and truly over. So off a high capacity V-mount battery, so my biggest one's 310 watt hour, that's what, about 15 hours? So if I'm still on set in 15 hours time, something's gone really wrong. The next possible negative is there's no remote control options for this, so you can't run it off DMX, but you also can't run it off a phone app. So if you're looking for something that runs off a phone app while you stand behind your camera, this is not the light for you. Now here's the next negative for me, and that is the white point accuracy of this unit. So what I mean by this unit is this one sitting here. So when I did my testing, in its warm whites, that's between 3000 and 4000 Kelvin, its delta UV was out by, on average, minus 0.0041, which in less technical terms means that it's magenta by the equivalent of about a 1/4 correction gel, or just a bit under a 1/4 correction gel, which of course you can adjust with the plus minus green here. The negative for me with that is I've watched a few other people's reviews, and people that also, like me, use a Sekonic C800 to do meter testing. All of them had slightly different numbers. So that indicates to me that these lights have a bit of variation from batch to batch. So if you're going to buy two of these, you'd want to buy them at the same time, so that way they match up beautifully, so they're from the same batch. Otherwise, you might have to do a little bit of fine-tuning adjustment, if you want to get two backlights to match, for example. All right, so let's do a quick run through of what this thing can do. Now, the reason it's so dark in here is because this is still only a 20-watt light. So to give you some idea of brightness, in its HSI mode, it can easily overpower the lighting that's in my house at night. But if I use it in this scenario where I'm pushing the color into a daylight lit environment, it's only going to add a bit of color to the shadows. So even though it kicks ass compared to other small lights, it's not going to replace a big light anytime soon. Okay, so let's start off with the CCT mode. So CCT, you've got three parameters of adjustment: your brightness, your Kelvin, and your plus minus green. We've got three knobs on the side, so very, very simple. So the top knob is your dimmer, which does 1% increments. The next knob is your Kelvin, which is adjustable in 50-degree Kelvin increments. If we go all the way down the bottom, it's 2,800 Kelvin, and all the way up the top is 10,000 Kelvin. Now, if you're wondering where you'd possibly use a 10,000 Kelvin light, where I use 10,000 Kelvin as a key is if we're doing a morning television show breakfast crossover or something like that, and the sun hasn't come up yet, but we've got light in the sky, it's usually at about 8 to 10,000 Kelvin. So that's when I use it to match in. All right, and the last knob, of course, is your plus minus green adjustment. Okay, so that's in 1% increments to plus 100 and minus 100. All right, let's go into our next mode, which is HSI mode, hue, saturation, and intensity. So again, you've got three modes, three parameters of adjustment and three knobs. So we've got our dimmer. We've got our saturation. Okay, so that's how much colored light's being added to the white light. And this thing does desaturate to a white color emitter, not some RGB crappy mix. And the last knob, or the center knob here, is our hue angle. So we've got 360 colors from which we can choose. Now the next mode of operation is RGB. Okay, so on RGB, your top knob is your dimmer. Now the bottom knob here selects what it is you're changing. So at the moment I've got it turned all the way counterclockwise. So you can see R is flashing. So we can adjust our red levels. Now with the adjustment of the individual levels, it's done with the buttons here. So the up and down buttons. So now we're adding red. Now I've already got white turned on full blast. So when we add red, red and white make pink. Now, as you can see, the adjustment scale there is from 0 to 255. So that ties in with DMX values. Now, this unit doesn't have DMX, but the other lights in this family from Lupo do have DMX. Its bigger brothers and sisters have DMX. All right, let's say we want to adjust our green. We just move the bottom knob across until our G flashes here. Now we can adjust green, and I keep going across. We can adjust our blue values. And we can now adjust our white values. Now, if I keep turning the knob, we can adjust our white even further. So let's keep turning. Okay, I can adjust the CCT value. And if I keep turning it more, I can adjust our plus minus green value. Now, the next mode of operation is presets. So this is like a poor man's gels library. So if you're not good at operating an RGB mode or a HSI mode, this is a good mode for you to look through to find colors. So you just use your up and down button and you can scroll through a huge range of pre-programmed colors. Okay, so the next mode is effects. We'll start off with what I think is the weakest of all the effects, and that's the fire mode. For me, it just doesn't look like a believable fire, but that's the case with most LEDs. All right, let's scroll through. We've got, whoops, I'm not in the menu. There we go. We've got, the next one is strobe. Now, in all of your modes, you can adjust things like the pace and the frequency. I'm not going to play with the strobe too much. Party, so party, we can speed up the rate at which it's happening. Now, your party mode's pretty much like a color chase. So pretty straightforward. Next one is cop car. So cop car, you can adjust the color of the light, red, green, blue, white, whether it's red or blue, and how many times it flashes. So, the usual adjustments for a cop car. Not a bad cop car effect, I've got to say. All right, next one is disco. You've got two different modes of disco. So if you're not happy with this disco, you can go to the one next door. Okay, so two different disco modes. We've got television in black and white. We've got television in color. We've got paparazzi. So all the usual things, lightning, explosion. So fireworks. Look, there's plenty of options here. For effects wise, for you to pull something out of the hat if you need it. Now let's have a look through our menu system. So we've got manual, so that's all the operating modes we were in just before. The next thing along is device settings. So let's have a look in there. So we can set how long the display stays on before it turns off after we've done an adjustment. The next thing is filter speed. So you've got a choice of normal or high speed. I have no idea what that does. I haven't been able to figure that out. And the next thing is linearization. That's a big word. So that's basically your dimmer curve. So we'll go into there so you can select linear, exponential or logarithmic. Let's go back out of there. And then you've got your CCT limit. So at the moment it's 2,800 to 10,000, which is the entire range. We can press that and select 3,200 to 5,600. So that might be handy if you're using it as a camera top light and you're just going from daylight to tungsten environments. You can just spin the knob all the way. You don't have to try and read it as you're going. I think that's it for this menu. Let's have a look. And exit, yeah. So that's the base menu system. All right, so let's start going through all the data that I've collected, starting with CCT accuracies. Between 2,800 and 3,000 Kelvin, it is typically accurate to 59 Kelvin. Between 3,000 and 4,000 Kelvin, it is typically accurate to 115 Kelvin. Between 4,000 Kelvin and 5,000 Kelvin, it reads on average under by 153 Kelvin. And between 5,000 Kelvin and 6,000 Kelvin, it is typically out by 87 Kelvin. Okay, let's have a look at our TM30 color vector scores. Between 2,800 Kelvin and 3,000 Kelvin, it averaged 93.8. Between 3,000 Kelvin and 4,000 Kelvin, it averaged 93. Between 4,000 Kelvin and 5,000 Kelvin, it averaged 93. And from 5,000 Kelvin to 6,000 Kelvin, it averaged 92.3. All right, so let's take a look at our average delta UV scores. Between 2,800 Kelvin and 3,000 Kelvin, it came in at minus 0.0045. Between 3,000 Kelvin and 4,000 Kelvin, the average was minus 0.0041. Between 4,000 and 5,000 Kelvin, the average was minus 0.0015. And from 5,000 Kelvin to 6,000 Kelvin, the average was plus 0.0017. Let's take a closer look at our CCTs, starting with the lowest CCT we can dial in. 2,800 Kelvin comes in at 2,909 with a TM30 color vector score of 93% color render with 104% saturation. And here is the wavelength. 3,200 Kelvin came in at 3,177 with an SSI score of 82. The TM30 color vector score was 92% color render with an average 99% saturation. Here are the individual CRI scores. R9, R8 and R12 are all below 90. Here is the wavelength. And the delta UV was out by minus 0.0049. When I dialed in 4,400 Kelvin, I got 4,216 with a TM30 color vector score of 93% color render with 99% average saturation. Here are the individual CRI scores. R9 and R12 are below 90. Here is the wavelength. And the delta UV was out by minus 0.0017. When I dialed in 5,600 Kelvin, I got 5,645 with an SSI score of 75. The TM30 color vector score was 92% color render with an average 98% saturation. Here are the individual CRI scores. R9 and R12 are below 90. This is the wavelength. And the delta UV point was plus 0.0018. So this is where it sits in relation to the Planckian curve, and this is where it sits in relation to the daylight curve. When I dialed in the top Kelvin of 10,000 Kelvin, I got 9,618 Kelvin with a TM30 color vector score of 88% color render with an average of 96% saturation. And here is the wavelength. Let's have a look at how it went in HSI mode, starting off with full saturated colors. Red, which should be 0, came in at 2 degrees. Green, which should be 120 degrees, came in at 118 degrees. Blue was smack on at 240 degrees. Yellow, which should be 60 degrees, was very close at 63. Cyan, which should be 180, came in at 226. And magenta, which should be 300, came in at 257. Now, like a lot of lights these days, this thing has highly saturated colors. So when it's desaturated to 50%, it can still read as 100% saturation on my meter. So I'm not going to go through the scores. However, it does desaturate to 5,556 Kelvin. I'm Andrew Locke. See you on the next episode of Gaffer in Gear.